Hello? 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 This is the Vancouver Real Estate Podcast.
And welcome back to Vancouver Real Estate Podcast. I'm your host, Adam Scalina.
And I'm your other host, Matt Scalina.
Very excited to have Miro Cernetig today on the program. He is a veteran journalist. He is the owner of CityAge. He's an urban affairs expert, all around really, really bright guy. And it's a great conversation today about the city we love.
The city we love, Adam. It's also about a poll that they, or survey that they commissioned about the Vancouver brand.
Yes.
And no spoiler alerts here, but 2 out of 3 people think the Vancouver brand is in decline.
You know, when I
Is
think
that a surprise? Is that a surprise to you?
It's a surprise because I think when I think about brands, I think about like your suit brands, like Joe Fresh or whatever. Is it Joe Fresh?
Yeah, it's a suit brand. Yeah, that's where you get your suits.
But here's I don't really think about cities and how they're branded, and this is a really it's very interesting. Not only talking about why a city should have a brand, but also what it can actually do for a city. And I think this was a lot of the poll that he created, this poll where he was trying to get a general sense of how residents felt about the brand about the Vancouver brand. And spoiler alert, 2 out of 3, Matt, we're feeling like we're on the decline.
That's right. Yeah, I think you hit on it though. Why we need a brand, how important a city's brand is, both for how residents feel, how the world perceives you, and what comes of it, what you can gain. Because as you know, Adam, we are only the stories we tell ourselves and each other about ourselves. I think that was Sapiens. But anyway, we should move along because this one is a fantastic conversation. I really enjoyed this.
For sure. Matt, before we get to that, of course, we've got the segment that remains nameless.
We do. The segment that remains nameless. I'm throwing a curveball in this week, Adam, in terms of the quiz question. And it's kind of related to today's topic. So the question for you, Adam, is what city created the most successful branding campaign in urban history? One so strong, people still wear it 50 years later. What city created the most successful branding campaign in urban history?
I think it's the I Heart New York shirt cup brand that was on everything. Excuse me.
You are absolutely right. So I Love New York is exactly it. There's a lot of other successful branding. And I don't think that's what Miro's really talking about today when he's talking about branding. He's talking about more of a holistic idea about what a city means and why it's important. But, Adam, here's what's interesting. I left the conversation with Miro thinking about city branding, and I immediately was thinking about I Love New York. So let me just tell you a little story. I went to ChatGPT just to confirm what I thought, that I Love New York was the most successful branding campaign a city's ever went through, and I was correct. So it was launched in 1970. This is what ChatGPT tells me. ChatGPT, by the way, also knows that we host the Vancouver Real Estate Podcast, so it has a bit of a slant to it. It says, launched in 1977, New York City was bankrupt, dangerous, and widely mocked. And it has cross-generational staying power. But here's what's the interesting part. What this means for Vancouver is what ChatGPT said. If you're thinking about Vancouver's brand, I said nothing about Vancouver's brand, mind you. If you're thinking about Vancouver's brand, New York City's brand was strengthened by a simple, optimistic message at a moment of deep urban pessimism. Vancouver is entering a similar moment. A vibe of malaise, affordability, angst, political fragmentation, and declining civic confidence, I should say. This is precisely when brand narratives matter most and when bold, simple reframing can have real impact. So this is interesting that ChatGPT, who I didn't mention anything about Miro, branding of Vancouver, or anything else, came up with basically the topic of our conversation today. So I guess what I'm trying to tell you, Adam, is I hit it out of the park with the quiz question, and maybe we should cut to our talk with Miro Cernetig because it's a good one.
Yeah, before we get there, what was what year was that?
77. So you know what actually, it's funny because I had this, I maybe, you always, it's funny. We talked about on this episode, rolling up our sleeves and getting down to work and calling things out and, being honest with yourself a little bit. And I brought up my experience at the bank this morning. And of course, suddenly I feel a little bit anxious about doing that. But why I was thinking about the I Love New York is because I'd heard at some point in the past about this slogan being at a time where, it was impossible to ride the subway. It was too dangerous. There's graffiti everywhere, just rampant kind of petty crime. The city was in dire straits. And, I'm thinking about this morning when I'm literally walking over a guy passed out in the middle of a bank and nobody's doing anything. And it put me in mind of New York in the 70s when I wasn't even alive. But that's what it put me in mind of. And that's where this question came from.
I would have guessed you were alive. All right, let's cut to our conversation.
This is a good one. Enjoy.
Okay, so we're here with Miro Cernetig, and he is a journalist, urban affairs expert, and owner, CEO of CityAge. How you doing, Miro? Thanks for taking the time today.
I'm good. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, maybe for our listeners, Miro, can you start by telling us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. I live in Vancouver. I've lived here for quite a while, quite on and off since '86, but I've been in and out. And my background was primarily journalism. So I worked at the Globe and Mail for many years in national bureaus, covered the Arctic. Covered the West, the Arctic. Then I was Vancouver bureau chief, did Alberta as well, and then I spent about 4.5 years in Beijing, and then another tour after 9/11 in New York. And I came back, I went to Montreal for a bit, and then I came back here, and I think it was 2007. And the sun made me, found me a job in Victoria because I wanted to come back to the coast. And then eventually I got it, they gave me a column for a few years. And then in 2010, it all changed because I left journalism full time and I started a branding company and I started CityAge, of all those things. But most of my work is actually in CityAge and in branding now.
Okay, and it's interesting. Yeah, what the meat of the conversation today we're hoping to talk about is branding and city branding and Vancouver's brand. I'm just curious, Miro. Like you've been around the world, worked around the world across Canada. How do you see Vancouver as a city in relation to kind of your global travels?
Well, I think every city is different. That's one thing. So it's hard to pigeonhole cities. I think they're all different and they all have different rhythms. But Vancouver is a mid-sized city in a beautiful spot in the world, in a really stable country. So it punches above its weight in many ways because of its geography and beauty, and also because it's we don't have 2 feet of snow every winter. So I think that makes Vancouver pretty special. And I think it's kind of, I think people see Vancouver as, a place that's really connected to nature. And, and it's almost very few people come here and don't think, wow, this is a beautiful city. But where I think I think we overestimate it perhaps internally is there's not as much going on here as people think there is. And a lot of our economy is based on real estate, as you both know, and development. So it's changing a bit, but things have. So I think Vancouver is, it's a global brand for sure. Probably even more so than Toronto in some ways.
Can we talk a bit about that brand? What in your mind? Like, actually, before we talk about Vancouver's brand, I'm kind of interested, and Adam and I talked about this before we went live, but the idea of branding cities, like cities having a brand. Can you talk about the importance of a brand and the idea of because it strikes me as a very kind of like an advertising kind of term, right? Or a company building term that's being used for cities. So can you talk a little bit about the idea of a city brand?
Yeah. So I think to understand that, you have to first understand where we are with brands in the world today, right? I think branding is often seen as marketing, a logo and a flag, that kind of thing. That's not really what a brand is. A brand is really a story. It's what actually your story is. People don't remember the CEO of Coca-Cola, but they remember Coca-Cola, right? Same with all these big companies. Very few people are like a Steve Jobs. So brands are really the story of a city. And I think it really has taken off, I think, since the 50s, when it really started to really, I mean, people always talk about Chicago and New York and Rome. These were like they were stories, right? And Hollywood did a lot of that. But what really happened in the 60s and 70s is that branding became much more prevalent in business. People realized that there was a real value in it, but they still saw it as a marketing tool, I think, largely. Not really as there a story. So and if everybody's watched Mad Men, I think that's the beginning. If you ever want to understand branding, that's a great show to understand Madison Avenue and how these guys think about it and how it evolved. And you see the main character in that evolve from being a guy who just does, kind of pitch boards to the guy who actually invents the Coke commercial at the end, right? So he's getting a very concept. So with cities, I think what's happened it's really started, I think, in the 90s, where branding, these indexes of livability started to happen. The Economist was behind them. There are others, Anhold. And I used to write about that when I was in China, about Canada's brands. I was very interested in country brands and how they help trade and how a right story will get you what you need, right? Or get you into the door. And so countries have been branding for a long time. Cities, I think, picked it up in the 90s. I think the city that really did it terrifically was Sydney in 2000 at the Olympics. They basically, all of Australia did it because they had a national brand story that they adhered to. And what they really were doing was saying, we're not Crocodile Dundee anymore. We're like cosmopolitan, connected Sydney, right? And in that Olympics, they used that Olympics as basically a way to vector out that new brand story. So that's an example of a city doing it in a country. And Sydney now is, basically Vancouver likes to see itself as Sydney, but it's not. We're like very small compared to Sydney. We're not nearly as or is international. But at that point, I think cities started talking about brands, and we had mayors. I think Gregor Robertson was very good at branding in Vancouver. He really understood that because he came from Happy Planet. He's a guy who knew how to build brands, and he's a brand in himself, I think. And I think so around the 2000s, 90, it really started taking off in the 90s. And now it's a really big part of any city that doesn't have a brand strategy and a brand story is, behind the game, right? So that's when it started happening. And why did it happen? It really happened because cities started to realize that if they wanted to attract investment and invest in talent, human capital and investment capital, they really had to have a powerful story, a story that differentiated them in the world. And that's what a good city brand does. And Vancouver's had that. I think Vancouver from the 60s was beginning to build that, from the days of Greenpeace to, basically some of the progressive policies, kind of not putting freeway down the middle of, all around the city, all this stuff slowly built our brand. And I think the Olympics in 2010 really kind of nailed it for us.
And and we'd love to talk about the Olympics here, but I'm just thinking, is it mostly for the residents or is it for outsiders investing in the city? What is the purpose of the brand?
Well, that's a great question because it's right. A city has to the people in a city have to like their story to be a happy city. There's a guy I think who does a thing called Happy City, but it really is a thing.
Another show.
Yeah,
a long time ago.
Yeah.
Blanking on his name.
Charles Montgomery, I believe.
Right, Charles. Good.
And he did a really good job of understanding that happiness was important to cities. Bhutan knew it was happy for countries, right? A city brand or city story is for the people in the city. They have to believe in it and really like it to be proud of their city, right? And I think you see that in New York. You see that in really cities that are really on it, right? And it's a very cyclical thing because the story changes and, economies change. And then the other part of it is it's really important in a crowded marketplace, whether it's in tourism or whether it's in, attracting capital or foreign students, to have a really good story that you tell the world because that's what makes people want to come here. So the brand story is unbelievably important to a city. And I think a lot of people underestimate it.
What is, in your mind, Vancouver's brand? I mean, is it like the elevator pitch of Vancouver's brand? Do you have one?
Um, it would be a sleepy little town on the West Coast where you can connect to the Asia Pacific and nature. That would be the brand I see right now.
I always think beautiful but boring.
Yeah, I was being nice, sleepy. I mean, we have this. There's people who could talk about, like Carm Samal was doing a Daily High, but like the idea of no fun city, right? We
Yeah.
definitely have that brand. And, and I would say, I would actually, to that description, I would actually say a kind of troubled city, a troubled, sleepy city that's quite beautiful, that you can live and have a good life in on the edge of Canada's West Coast. But I think now there's a sense that there's a lot not going right in Vancouver.
Miro, can we talk about the troubled part? Is that like I know that you guys, and we'll get to this kind of poll that you took about the Vancouver brand right now and a general kind of malaise, as I think you put it. But is troubled something new, or has that always been the case? What do you mean by that?
I think it is new. I think some of the problems are really fundamentally different than they were in the past. And troubled, I mean, it's not a psychosis or anything, but we've got a lot of issues, right? We've got serious affordability issues, serious lack of social escalator for many of the people coming here. There's a lot of isolation going on. We've got serious congestion issues. We have real trouble keeping companies, despite all the things that we've done. And of course, I think I don't know if the streets are really unsafe, but there's a perception that they are. And there's some horror stories, people getting attacked with machetes and, people getting shot in the face in downtown and pepper sprayed. So those are not good things, right? Those are trouble. So I call them troubles. They're really, I guess, challenges, but they're really serious, and they impact your brand, both how you tell your own story and how other people see your story.
Do you see this as in thinking about, because we often talk about the show or on the show about kind of the post-Olympics, how exciting the city felt, and how positive like residents felt, people coming to visit Vancouver felt, tourism felt. It felt like there was like a real charge in like the, call it, 2011 to 2011 to maybe 2017-ish kind of period. What do you think the cause of, like, are we in some ways a victim? Are the current issues caused by the successful branding? Like, did we has that resulted in your mind in some of this downgrade, I guess, of the current state of the brand? Like, I'm thinking about affordability and people coming here and wanting to be here. Or do you see, like, is there something that you see as like the catalyst for maybe the downgrade?
I don't think it's got a lot to do with the brand. I mean, I think the brand has attracted investment and people, obviously, and a lot of that's shut off now because we didn't have, we've changed the policies on investing in real estate, so that's changing, and we're starting to see rents go down. Though things are happening, not enough building, but I don't think it's that. I think it's basically, I would say, I'm not blaming anyone here because I think I think everybody's got a piece of it, but I think we have policy failures. Like in terms of how we handle investment, how we handle taxes, how we handle development, how we handle mental illness. There are a lot of things that are, and there's a kind of a political correctness to Vancouver that I think, and maybe Canada, but Vancouver for sure, that paralyzes us from making hard choices, I think. So I think a lot of it's external and post-pandemic too. Like, I think all cities after the pandemic, budgets were strained. The spending was probably in many ways misdirected, some ways well-directed, but, the deficits are higher, the debt ratios are higher, and that's all because of the pandemic. So we're still living a post-pandemic world, and I think we're seeing a lot of that. But other cities don't have the same sort of issues. So a lot of it is, I think, self-inflicted, and I think it's because sometimes we're kind of finger pointing all the time here, right, to everybody else, instead of just sort of like saying, okay, here's some fundamental shifts we got to make. That's an opinion, but that's what I see. And with CityAge, I travel all over the place to all these cities, and all cities have challenges, but that's a particular, I think, kind of culture here, right? That's taken root in the last 10 years, 15 years.
And like what I think you've kind of, to me at least, put your finger on it, Miro, but like what is that culture? So it's a political correctness. It's kind of an inability to take responsibility. Like I said to Adam, and this is just this happened to me this morning. Okay, I went to the TD Bank in East Vancouver, and I think this speaks to kind of this general sense of disorder and that something's wrong, and that everybody's turning a blind eye, including myself. Literally, the bank was open. There was about 10 people waiting in line. I went to the ATM, which was in the bank, and there was a man passed out on the floor in the middle of the bank. And the woman that walked in ahead of me said, like, hey, what's the story here? And they said, yeah, we've called somebody. And it's 10 in the morning. And like people are walking over a guy on the floor. And you're like, something's fundamentally wrong here. This wouldn't happen everywhere. And especially it wouldn't happen where the guy's probably been there since they opened at 8:30. And like, no one does anything. No one knows what to do. But also they probably called somebody at 8:30 and nobody's there yet to sort this out. It's like, there's something like really corrupting about the kind of civic fabric when that's happening.
And again, I think a lot of that's policy, because I'm pretty sure if you called 911, said here, there's someone lying on the floor here, they're not going to send the police probably.
No,
they might send paramedics maybe, and they're pretty good at that. They're saving lives down there all the time, right? I mean, that's what all the sirens about. But there is a sort of like, what do you do as a citizen? Like, who do you call? You don't see a lot of policemen walking, the streets anymore. Like I guess there are some beat cops, but mainly they're in their cars, so they're not there. So and that's policy, right? Like, you can have a policy saying that anytime someone's in a public space passed out, that they have to be taken to an ER. Now that's probably a protocol, but I don't know whether it's enforced.
It's actually enforced.
The way it should be. Yeah. Now, all that said, I think, those paramedics, the people who are on the streets there dealing with the fentanyl crisis are like, really everyday heroes. And that sounds trite, but they really are. That's a tough job that they do. Yeah. And we're lucky they do it.
No kidding.
But it's part of our brand. But it is part of our, anytime I talk to anybody about Vancouver, they're shocked by what they see in the downtown east side on Hastings.
Yeah. This was even further east. Like, this was like east of Nanaimo. It's not even like, okay, I was in the heart of it. This is, it's just something that feels like we've gotten kind of used to in a way that seems, specific to here. And I think fentanyl, I was just talking to somebody yesterday who's had a family member who died of a fentanyl overdose, who shouldn't have, but did. So there's a lot of this is rooted in that. But we've had that before. Like, when I was here when I took over the bureau in '93 for the Globe, they had an outbreak of heroin deaths because someone was lacing heroin. I think probably the kind of fentanyl, right? And people thought it was heroin, and they were dying in one weekend. Like I said, 15 or 20 people died. It was the beginning of a taste of what could really go wrong when you don't get the drug. But so there's nothing really new. I think the volume of it is what's right. So, I mean, and that's just kind of one of these. I mean, this general sense of disorder. You talked about affordability, social mobility or lack of social mobility, this kind of feeling of isolation and investments or companies not staying in Vancouver. Maybe just taking a step back, can we talk about the poll that, I guess, because this poll kind of speaks to this general sense of malaise with the brand. Yeah. But like, can we talk about why you took a poll, why now, and what you found?
Well, so first I'll tell you, so CityAge started after I left journalism, shortly after the Olympics, because cities were becoming really prominent, and Vancouver was kind of at the top of its game. And I thought it'd be a good, interesting kind of journalism, almost platform. So we've done that, and there's like 30,000 people have come to them. They're all kind of leaders, and we do them all over North America, right? And so I go around, so I'm really always thinking about how cities kind of market themselves and tell their stories and I meet the people who do it, right? From all kinds of areas. And I kind of just thought to myself, and I'm based here, and I thought, well, I should really do something here for the city, like that I think is interesting. So we did a CityAge called the Next Vancouver, and the Vancouver Sun helped us do it. And they've been writing stories and still are about that. And the whole idea was the Next Vancouver was to get about 150 leaders in a room and identify 6 or 8 ideas that we're really good at. And my idea was, if the brand is not performing, what do we need to do to make it better? And, and without getting into politics or getting into hand-wringing, what are really practical areas? And so that conference was really teased out a few ideas. One, places where we really performed tremendously well in Canada and in the province, in the city, that also is an export. Things that we're known for, that we can build technology and attract, basically export talent and technologies or services, and also bring people in. So if you go on that list, it gets pretty interesting. And what I came up with, and I guess the Sun with me, was, life sciences, the new St. Paul's Providence Hospital, an amazing thing that's going to happen there, right? They're creating a whole sector. And that gets you into genomics and all the people in that life science corridor. That's one of our really bright spots. The other one is ocean. People forget this, but they don't forget it. They see it, but they don't realize how much we are a global ocean hub. And that's really one of the things I'm excited about. So I'm just going to do another one in June, probably in North Vancouver at the shipyards, I hope. That's called Green Blue Oceans, which will look at the premise that Vancouver really is a global ocean hub, and we got to do more to claim that and attract that. It's something we can all unite around. It's very unified. The other one I just quickly is like innovation in mining. We have some of the best companies in the world doing that. There's other areas like that. I think even our relations with Indigenous and First Nations is actually a brand new model for the world. It's not perfect, and there's ups and downs and complexities to it, but there's no doubt that something is really happening there, right? Like even the pipeline, people don't realize the LNG pipeline, the Nishiga owned 51% of it. I mean, they're true equity partners, right? So and who would have thought that 25 years ago? So there's a lot going on here. So the idea was, let's find these ideas. So that's what I did. And so part of that is I often work with the Mustel Group, who are really great pollsters. And I've known Evie Mustel for decades. And she was doing a poll, and I said, well, here we add a few questions. And it was just about, how do you feel about the Vancouver brand? And I wanted to see if I was right. My perception is basically totally subjective, was that the Vancouver brand is in decline, and that people here feel it too. So we polled. And so what was interesting about the poll, it was about 400 people, I think. So it's actually a pretty good poll locally. It's a margin of error plus or minus 3 or 4%. What we did is what Mustel did, or the Mustel Group did, is they polled people in Metro Vancouver. So we polled ourselves about what we think about our brand. And 2 out of 3 people said it was in decline, which is not good.
No.
That's not a hopeful sign. It should be the other way. So that proved the point. So what I take from that is, and I've written a few pieces on it, is we've got to understand that that's the case, that there are major challenges here, that people know it, and these are like, that's an omnibus poll. It's a poll of average people, I'd say, right? Or people, a spectrum of people. And so the solution is, you got to figure out what are the areas that we can start building in and investing in, that people are that work with the Vancouver brand. That's my thesis.
Was it just literally that question? Like, is the brand in decline, yes or no? Or were there a series of questions? Like, did it get deeper than that?
Yeah, the poll's online, so you can go see it. Yeah, the poll asked things about like what worries you, and affordability came up. There was another affordability, crime, street crime came up. Lack of government policy came up, oddly enough. And I don't have it in front of me, but yeah, there's like you can dig down, and it really is only a first. If you really wanted to do this properly, you'd do 1,000 people and spend $25,000 on it. But it'd probably be worth doing to really see what people are really thinking and what they really want. Mm-hmm. So it's not, I wouldn't even call it a poll. I think it was more like a survey. To me, polls are always like for or against. This is more like a survey. And the survey was basically 2 out of 3 people think Vancouver's in decline. And since then, we lost the fireworks, right? This thing that was huge, and it's sort of you could feel it drifting away, right? Like smoke in the wind. But they pulled the plug, and that's another sign of that's something. I don't blame anybody in particular for that, but there's a sign there. That's a sign. If you want to take a pulse of the health of your civic life, that would be another negative, probably.
So in that light, do you think that we're kind of drifting into decline, or do you see us as kind of sitting here on the edge of opportunity in your mind?
I'm on the edge of opportunity side. Like I don't want to come across like it's doom and gloom. I still think I live here because this is a tremendous place to do a lot of things from, right? And that hasn't changed. And so some of those things I talked about, like life science, oceans, mining, innovation in mining, and tourism, like there's our embrace of nature and protecting it, making 25% of the province or whatever number is now parkland is. These are amazing things to build on for generations, right? My point is only that we've got to figure something out we really want to do together and go for it. Maybe it's a few things, but we don't, every city has a cycle on this too. Like you can't, but you have these moments like LA had it in the Olympics, remade it. Now they're doing another one. We'll see how they do. We had Expo 86, which was fundamentally changed the city forever, opened it up to the Asia Pacific. The Olympics did the same thing, I think, in a different way. So, what's next? That's what the Next Vancouver is about.
Yeah.
And just thinking about of course we're going to get to that. How do you fix how do you approach fixing a brand that's in decline in the city? And is it kind of reconsidering the story around some of these things that you're talking about, like the
oceans, life sciences?
Oceans, yeah, exactly. Life sciences, is it like repositioning the narrative of the city, or is it or do you see it more as like, is there low hanging fruit that we haven't kind of covered?
That's easier said than done. I'll acknowledge that, right? And it doesn't come from just a politician. It doesn't come from just a big, billionaire businessman. They have to coalesce around something, right? They don't even have to agree on everything, and they're not going to. But they have to coalesce around a big idea, or a few big ideas in the city and what it stands for. And, I would say like 10 years ago, it was we could say what things we stood for pretty clearly. And now, because we're so inward looking, we don't really. I mean, I'm hard pressed to say what we stand for. I mean, we talk about affordable housing, but we don't have it. We talk about equity, but we don't have it. We talk about building a high tech AI hub. We don't have it. We have parts of it. So a lot of that are platitudes, right? And I think what you have to do is you have to sort of build up stuff yourself. And so I think St. Paul's, for example, that is, we needed to build it, but that's a multi-billion-dollar investment in the future and people, right? Not just in terms of their health, but in terms of the talent, the innovation. Like that's going to be an innovation hub. You're going to build, I'll bet you that place will build unicorns eventually, because it's a place for people to come together. And I think we have to do the similar thing in other areas. And I think, like, for example, if you looked at my idea about ocean, green, blue ocean, green for technology, blue for the blue economy, ocean because it's all coasts, right? It's blue and oceans. It's very uniform. We all say Canada's an energy superpower. The reality is we're a ocean superpower. And we have the longest coastline in the world, I think. So do we really embrace that? I mean, there's pieces of it, but do you ever see anybody talking about some big idea like that? I don't. No. I see some great people talking about pieces of it. We got some great companies here, but you don't see it. And so I think it's a little bit, sounds kind of corny, but I think you got to kind of you have to pick your ideas and you got to build a civic infrastructure around it. And if you really think about these events, there's a lot of people who love the Olympics, a lot of people don't like the Olympics, right? And you can weigh them in same with expositions. But what they do is they do build an infrastructure around a big idea for like 10 years. It takes about 10 years to do one of these events. When you start, like, people don't realize, and I only know a little bit about it, but the idea of the Olympics probably I forget, I know this somewhere in my back of my head, but it started with a few people, right? He said, why don't we do this? And then someone, I think Jack Poole was one of them. And then, someone writes it down. And then they get people together, and then they get the government behind it. That's how it happens. And suddenly you've got a network of people that essentially is a civic infrastructure that involves business and government and people and different parts of society who are actually united about around a big idea. And the Olympics are $1 billion idea, right? And I think you can do the same thing around these other ideas. I don't know if that makes sense to you, but
Totally.
It totally does. And it makes me think of, and at least in this, I'm taking everything from a Vancouver Sun article, but they had a response from Ken Sim, who basically was saying, like, what are you talking about? Vancouver's doing great. FIFA's coming, the World Cup's coming. He cited a couple other things that we have going for us. And I guess it kind of makes me think, how has this been received? Are you from your perspective, Miro, are people going like, yeah, you're onto something here, let's build out the next big idea? Or are people going, what are you talking? Like, Ken Sim seemed to fundamentally just disagree with the premise that Vancouver was generally in a malaise.
Yeah, he definitely did. But that's publicly. Privately, I don't know. I don't know the mayor. I usually get to meet them, but I haven't met him yet. I know a lot of people in the city and on council, some of whom I think would agree with this. But a mayor's job is to boost a city. So I wouldn't expect him to come out. Come out and say, we're going down.
You've nailed my term.
Yeah, and he's got to get reelected. And also, I'm not saying it's going down the tubes. I'm just saying the brand is in decline, right? The city is the city, and he's got massive challenges. They all do. But here's the thing about FIFA. And I love soccer and I love the World Cup, and it's great that we're doing it. But that's not infrastructure. That's not civic infrastructure. That's an event you're paying for, right? And you could say we pay for the Olympics, but you get a lot out of the Olympics too, right? Like if you look at the Olympics, it catalyzed the Candid line, which changed YVR. It catalyzed the Sea to Sky Highway, which, again, catalyzed that part of the world, made it safer. Squamish is exploding. A lot of it is because that highway is just better and safer. FIFA are like, it's like buying a museum exhibit. So I'll give you an example of this. I was really lucky as a journalist to have a really eclectic I could do almost anything I wanted, right? So I was always interested in things. And when I was in Victoria in about 2008 or 9, I guess, the biggest collection of Pacific Northwest art came up for purchase. It was being sold, right? And it's all from here, right? I think I wrote a story saying, like, we should buy this, and this is what should go into the Royal Museum, right? Whatever we call it there, the Royal BC Museum, but the museum in Victoria, right on the waterfront, or build one. Take the biggest and greatest collection of Pacific Northwest Indigenous art and put it in a museum. And then you've got something that you built that will give back forever. It'll attract tourism, it'll attract academics, it'll attract artists, right? So guess what happened? You guys, do you know this story? So
I don't think so.
Nobody here bought it. The Thompson family bought the entire collection, and it's in Toronto. The Royal what do they call it there? I forget all the names, but the museum. So Toronto bought it. The Thompsons, they're doing things like that with Hudson's Bay too. Like, they really care about history and they have the money to do it. But they bought it. We didn't. You know what the museum bought? A spoon, one spoon. At the same time, they had a traveling exhibit to get bums and seats, right, and sell tickets. And I think it was either the Titanic or it was King Tut's, one of these shows that rotate.
Yeah.
And they do sell tickets temporarily and please the tourists and sometimes the locals. But you haven't built anything. You're renting. You're renting your interest, right? Whereas if you build your interest, you got it forever. And that's the difference between being a FIFA city and then being an Olympic city that really is a host city that you can claim forever. Like FIFA, and also the FIFA thing, it's spread over 16 cities, isn't it? So how much value are you getting in that? No, I'm not saying we shouldn't do it. I don't know about the economics and how it's the spin-offs, but I think we should build things. And I think Vancouver, look at the art gallery. There's the classic example of Vancouver. I think you can measure the problems in Vancouver in line in parallel with what's going on with that art gallery. Tremendous amounts of money wasted. Designs have come and gone. We keep hiring Americans to run it. I like Americans. I love Americans, but I would think there's a Canadian architect who could design this. But a philanthropist has put a lot of money in there, is matching money, to do it, but they're in real trouble. Nothing is happening. We have a guy like Bob Rennie, who's one of North America's top collectors of contemporary art. He's really interested in that, but he puts I don't know what Bob does with all of his stuff, but a lot of it's in the Canadian Museum. I got the museum names all wrong, but, in Ottawa, which is great, but it could be here. I don't know if Bob would want to do that, but it could be, right? But you can't if you can't build a building. And even if you want to build a building or you can't build a building, maybe you should just rethink the building you have and put something in it that is off here, that, people that will attract people and build things. And I think that's fundamentally something that Vancouver's not that great at. You're making me think. I haven't really thought about it in that way before, but it is interesting. So we'll renovate a building like the museum, but we don't. And we've got totems in there and stuff like that. It's pretty cool, but it's sort of like it's a museum, right? Like it hasn't changed very much. They have these traveling exhibits, but you have this, that's an opportunity that was squandered, in my mind, completely squandered. Now, of course, they could probably rent it from the Royal Ontario Museum and put it out as an exhibit, and they have to pay for it.
Right.
Yeah. Geez. I really like and for some reason I haven't thought about it the way you're positioning it, like the difference between the Olympics versus FIFA, the World Cup, like actually building the infrastructure and getting the lasting benefit from these kind of events as opposed to the one-offs.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense.
Now we've had some, and these things come and go, and sometimes they're private sector, but I think one of the things that was built here was the Globe conference. I don't know if you guys remember. It was called Globe, and it really was about the business of the environment. It was really headed by a guy named John Weeb. He's actually my neighbor, but and he built it up with other people and the Canadian government, and it was really incubated, right? But it became, I don't know what it's like now. I don't think it's the same, but for a while it was a world-renowned conference where world leaders came, the prime ministers came, top CEOs came, and they talked about the business of the environment and climate and all of that. But it's the perfect Vancouver conference for this place, right? And that's sort of like dissipated now, right? And in my mind, that's the kind of event that's your Davos. That's your Davos by the sea. And I think that actually one of the things I'm trying to do with CityAge in my own small way is do something that is of here, that has an international following to some degree. But I do think, we could do, I don't want to, maybe Davos is not the right analogy because it's got such bad press now, but it's a very interesting thing. Davos is interesting. But it's a success story. And that is something that someone built that has become a piece of infrastructure, like civic infrastructure for that place, right? And for a lot of other leaders. Forget all the conspiracy theories, but the fact is that it exists and it's a brand that everybody knows. And we should have something like that here. And people might say, "Oh, we had TED," but no, you bought TED. You're renting TED, and you're renting people.
But this goes back to these ideas like this, the oceans idea. Like I feel like that one to me is like, you said unifying. It's like who couldn't get behind that? That's like such a of here, and it seems like such an exciting kind of idea.
Yeah, it excites me. I just think I think it's one of these ideas that actually is completely unifying. I mean, who can't get behind it? And it's respectful too. I think because it doesn't matter where you are. You don't have to be the biggest city. You can be on the island. You can be anywhere. And there's a lot of amazing companies. Like C-SPAN is an amazing company, right? It builds world-class ships. And we do a lot of like robotics. A lot of the early work on the Titanic came out of here, right? So we've done a lot of stuff, and we have a lot of film people here too, obviously. But so that's another one where I think, we could do a lot better. We do pretty well, but we're also we rent productions. But the ocean one is really interesting because I really got into it because I was always interested in salmon. I came from Toronto, where I grew up. I came out here and I'd never seen the ocean. I couldn't believe. I was born in Scotland, so I'd seen the ocean, but I'd never seen an ocean I'd want to swim in. And I came out here and I was amazed by it. And I covered salmon in the salmon treaties. And there were a couple of guys at the paper, the Sun, when I was there at the Sun, who were like experts on fishing and salmon. And I just thought it was such an iconic thing. And I wrote a column years later, like in 2020. Well, anyway, before 2010, where I found that I was writing about why salmon is the official fish of British Columbia. I assumed it was, and I wrote this column, and it came out of an editorial board meeting, and it sort of said, "Here's what salmon is. They're a bald eagle, la la la," some stuff like that, right? It was kind of like a think piece saying that's why salmon are official fish, and I thought better check that last part, and I looked, and of course, it wasn't. And I was kind of blown away. Everybody thought it was. So I changed the last line. That's why I nominate salmon as the official fish. And you know what happened is this is an example. I'm not saying this is me, by the way, but this is an example of an idea that people get around. Right? Like someone read that, the Pacific Salmon Foundation read it, the Fraser Basin Council read it, First Nations read it. I wrote a couple more columns, and I actually told the editor at the time, I said, we're going to make this official fish. We'll just get these people to write about it. And it's the official fish. And Christy Clark finally did it. It took a while. But that's an idea how you build an idea and get people around it. And I think that the reason I brought that up, it's very similar to the ocean idea. It's it's something that people in our DNA out here we get behind. So what we got to do as a city and as a metropolitan area, it's pretty true of British Columbia, but is you got to get your story. You got to get a story where you believe in the elements of it and they inspire you for your kids and your neighbors and it's positive. And you can still have all these disagreements. But you could embrace the ocean and still disagree about how many wharfs should be, how many moorings there should be on the Sunshine Coast. That's going to always happen. But the bigger idea is that we're a global ocean city, and we're a global life science city too. Like the RNA stuff here and vaccines that was done here was world class. So right. We got a few Nobel Prize winners here. Like we on these, there are these areas and others. I would also say, I think we've done that in architecture. And I think we've done it in design. I think it goes up and down. Vancouver was known for its Vancouverism, but some of the architects here are truly world class, and they came here and were inspired by the place, and the place nurtured them. Like look at Arthur Erickson, Robson Square. I don't think you could build that today. They would never give you the FS. Yeah. But by the way, that the Law Courts is actually a skyscraper laid on its side, right? That's the vision.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's great.
Yeah, that's the way you thought about it.
Can you talk about the role of the Next Metro Vancouver campaign, like how it ties into everything?
Well, we're doing that with the Vancouver Sun, where I used to work, and they're great people, and they've still got great reporters. They got fewer reporters, but they still got really good ones. And the idea is, and I think we're going to do it again. I haven't talked to the Harold Monroe, the editor-in-chief there, who I should say thank you to because he allowed that to happen. But the idea is that we're going to keep doing another event and keep writing about stuff. And I'm going to do the ocean one, as I said, in June of 2026, trying to get about 200 people together who are from here and abroad and around Canada. So I'm working on that, and we've got some support on that, which is nice. But the idea, I think, is we basically have either pieces, or the campaign really is getting people together around some of these various elements of the idea, right? Mm-hmm. So, because you can't build. You have to have a focus. So, so you can't have 7 ideas and everybody gets there and says, "Oh, those are 7 great ideas." You've got to have the network. One of those ideas or 2 of them has got to take off, and people have got to get around. And to be honest, people are trying to do all sorts of things, right? Like even the downtown east side, re-envision it and stuff like that. But that's an internal idea. That's something we need to do and we should do. Help The people need help there and rethink some of the policies and how we do things. But if you want a really big idea, it has to work locally and it has to work externally. So that starts narrowing you down quite a bit.
Mm-hmm. You got to think bigger.
Yeah, and we got, another one we rented, and I'm not saying it's a bad thing because it was a pretty great conference, but we have the Web Summit, which used to be Collision, but they were in Toronto for a certain number of years and in Montreal. And these are run by big corporations that rent out these conferences, right? They're subsidized. And there's nothing wrong with them. Keeps people in hotel rooms and all that, keep doing them. But I just think we should build a few ourselves. Things like that. I don't know if it's a conference, but like I raised Globe because Globe was a week-long thing that brought 5,000 or 10,000 people who were world leaders in business and innovation and government every year to the city. And they weren't here and it wasn't one of these conferences where you come and like it's all parties. It was a serious conference. Like people were looking at investment and innovation. So we need more of that.
Big ideas and the ability to actually move away from this kind of sense of paralysis almost and roll up the sleeves and get to work.
But, big ideas start with little ideas, right? Like, the Olympics is literally if someone was sitting around having a drink or something and said, we should get the Olympics for Vancouver. It's time. Because actually before 2010, about the 2000, Vancouver had the same kind of malaise, right? It was like all cities have these cycles. I think it's about 10 to 15 years. Like it's almost like a parabolic curve. It's just there's a natural sort of ebb and flow to a city's the power of a city's brand, and it gets reinvented. Things get added in, not necessarily subtracted, but they get added in and accentuated. That's the way to think about it. But so little things like a big little thing that we should fix in this city immediately. I'm not going to go into the social stuff because that's the whole, that should be done all the time. But something we should do is we should build or not build an art gallery and make a decision and do it. And whatever we put in it, it should be world class, and we should build it and build a whole infrastructure around it. And that infrastructure looks like artists. Emily Carr's a really interesting example too. But Granville, and we do things like Granville Island, when it was built, cutting edge. No one had seen that. Shipyards, same thing. These are held up in development circles as incredible rethinks of an urban area.
Yeah.
But there's another so we should build an art gallery, or not build, or decide not to build it and take the money and invest it in art and artists, so that we have we got a lot here, great ones, and we should do the same with Granville Island. Like figure it out. Like I read a lot and I don't hear much about what after Emily Carr left, what's really going on down there. Is there something that we're building there that builds more onto it? And those are I call those big ideas for the city. They're not big international ideas, but they add to the city. But we kind of let these things linger and drag on for. The art gallery stuff. Is that a 20-year-old story now?
Yeah. All right. Well, just as a final kind of point, it's interesting because I wanted to get to this idea of kind of brands being cyclical. So in some ways, it's just literally like time for a rethink. Like it's just, and probably 10, 15 years from now, we might be in the same place, but hopefully incrementally kind of ahead of the game. But in some ways, it's just, this is part of the kind of evolution of a city, if I understand it right in your mind, Miro.
Evolution of a city, yeah, and I think you have to pick a couple of big ideas, or at least one, and go for it. You got to have a 10-year idea, and I'll just close one thing. A lot of people say, "Oh, the Olympics are bought too." They're different than a FIFA. A FIFA comes and they fill hotel rooms, they get tourists in, and it's one-off, and they're gone, right? The Olympics linger because they're broad. There's a lot wrong with the Olympics, believe me, but there's a lot right about it, and that's why cities do them, and they're transformative, and it transformed this city. I think Expo 86 is the same. So there's a difference between renting an idea and building an idea here, right? And I'm like, let's pick a few ideas and build them. And I think we're in the middle of trying to do that in Canada too. Like, what are our big ideas? And that's the job of the prime minister, I guess. But
Right. That makes a lot of sense. Well, maybe we'll leave it there, Miro, but we do have this quick segment, the 5 lighthearted questions that we end the show with. Can you stick around for that?
sure.
Okay, so question number one book that you've read recently that you would recommend for our listeners.
I read an old book. It's quite old, but I read it recently as Sapiens.
Oh, yeah.
And that's worth reading. Because if you really want to understand brand, that is the best book that explains how brands work, in my mind.
Wow.
Interesting. Okay, that was not. I would never have thought of it that way, but that's great.
Yeah, read it. It's really interesting. It talks about how people imagine stories and keep stories. It's very interesting.
Right.
Right. In the last few years, Miro, is there a new belief, behavior, or habit that has improved your life?
I started. Well, two things. One, I moved to West Van, so I just look at the ocean all day. That helps a lot. That's probably why I'm thinking about ocean so much.
Yeah.
But I started doing the 16/8 intermittent fasting thing, and lost 10 pounds already. I find it very easy. I don't. Some days I'll miss it, but I generally do it. I think that's a really good thing for you. It's a kind of a discipline, and it keeps you from over drinking and overeating and like all that stuff.
Oh, that's great.
So I don't know if you can see the difference, but
question number 3. What have you been binge watching lately, or a movie recommendation?
I watch way too much Netflix and TV. Best movie is Frankenstein.
Huh.
Like the old Frankenstein?
No, Guillermo del Toro's. It's on Netflix. It's the new version of Frankenstein done by Guillermo del Toro, who did Shape of Water and Pan's Labyrinth. It is an unbelievable film, and it's done for Netflix. I guess anyway. It's magical realism with. And the question is who really is the monster, which is what Frankenstein's about. And it's an interesting parable. It's an interesting movie because of what's going on with AI, as we invent new life forms, which is what Frankenstein's about. So it's really an AI movie in some ways, but it's beautiful. I'd watch it again, and I often don't. The series is Polybius, by the guy who did Breaking Bad. That's a really interesting one.
Right, that's on Apple, isn't it? Or
Apple.
is that on? Yeah.
That's Apple. Yeah. I think it's free though. If you have Apple, it's a free watch if you have the account.
Fantastic. Favorite band or music? Something you're listening to lately?
I'm one of those people who can't remember music, but I'll tell you what I did watch. I guess I watched a lot of YouTube. The one I've been I got back into U2. I didn't realize how good it was until, because I never really liked Sting, not Sting, Bono.
Bono?
Bono. I was, I don't know, but he did a documentary on Apple about his life. And then I realized like the guy's a poet. And then I started going back and listening to that music, and it's incredible. His writing is incredible.
Yeah. It's interesting. I was biking a year ago. It's not a pop-up bar, like little cafe on, Adam, where's that? Along the seawall, right? Like in between Science World and kind of like Marina side. Batch. And then they had a guy doing covers of U2, and it's funny because I've never been a big fan, but I had a beer there and I was like, this sounds unbelievable. And then I went on a run, like literally just through the albums, and it was it's funny, you don't realize how good that music is. I had the same experience.
Yeah, I just watched the Spinal Tap Reunites movie with Bob Wright. And that's pretty funny. I wouldn't say it's good music, but it's funny.
Last but not least, Miro, before we let you go, something that you've purchased for under $1,500 that's had a positive impact on your life.
Can you get anything for $1,500?
We got to increase the post-inflation. This question's too old.
I don't really buy a lot of things. I mean, actually, you know what? I bought. This is going to sound prosaic, but I bought a new iMac, and because I was using a laptop, and it's it's changed the way I work.
Wow!
And when you say actually, that's just you mean desktop,
like a desktop?
Right?
Yeah, the desktop. Yeah, just the basic, which is like a powerhouse.
Yeah. No,
That's
I
great.
know. Yeah, that is a good one. That's great. Well, Miro, how can people learn more about what you're up to? I guess, of course,
You're writing in CityAge.
CityAge, you're
Well,
writing, everything.
Pretty much everything I do is at CityAge, CityAge.com. And I'm actually, I'll tell you guys, but I'm actually remaking the whole website because it turned into a very much an event business, and it was always meant to be a thought leadership business. So it's both, right? And me and my partner did it together, but I've decided to actually relaunch it probably in 2026, almost like as a magazine with lots of guest columns. Because we have about 30,000. I think I said about 30,000 people have signed up for CityAge around the world, mainly in North America, but some abroad. And they're really cool people. And so I can tap into them. So it's not like 1 million people, but it's 30,000 interesting people.
That might be better than a million people.
Well, everybody's interesting in their own way, right?
Yeah. That's right. Well, that's exciting. We'll have to watch, because hopefully we can have you back on and watch for the interesting ideas about the city. So there you have it, folks. Our discussion with Miro Cernetig about the Vancouver brand. Of course, veteran journalist and owner of CityAge. Great guest, really thoughtful guy, and a lot of interesting ideas there.
Yeah, and you know what? We'd love to hear from you, the listener, how you feel the Vancouver brand is doing, because we talk about this a lot on the show. I feel like I'm in the camp, the 2 out of 3 that thinks that we've been on the decline. But I wonder out there if people feel differently. Anyways, feel free to get in touch. Matt, what else do we have before we cut for the day?
One thing I wanted to mention, and nothing's confirmed, so maybe I'm speaking out of school, but we may get Brad West on the show. The mayor of Poco.
Interesting, I think.
I don't know if it's possible, but we're in the early stages, so that's exciting. But what else do we have before we cut for the day? Not much, Adam. We have first off, I think we're 2 episodes away from 500, and we're also 2 episodes away from the end of 2025. So, wow, that's going to be an episode for the ages. We also have, of course, Vancouver Real Estate Podcast.com. This is where all things real estate related live. We have buyers' resources. We have sellers' resources. We also have a great real estate team. That's all found at VancouverRealEstatePodcast.com. And if you like this episode or any other episode, and what we're asking people right now to do is share with a friend or family member, or rate or review. It helps us grow, keep the lights on, and we appreciate everybody that listens. And I think that's it. Yeah,
man. And if someone wants to get in touch with you, how can they get a hold of you?
Get in touch. I'll be here all through the holiday season, 778-847-2854, or Matt at VancouverRealEstatePodcast.com.
Or you can try me at 778-866-4574, or Adam at VancouverRealEstatePodcast.com.
And of course, we have that Kokomo line, info at VancouverRealEstatePodcast.com.
Have a great week, and we're back here next week with another great episode.
Take care.